everybody, and thank you so much for joining our second session of Cherry Beckert's 2023 Not-for-Profit Speaker Series. My name is Madeline Robbins, and I am our production manager here at Cherry Beckert. This year, we've been inspired and humbled by the efforts of not-for-profits to tirelessly fill those gaps by declining program revenue, donor support, and funding. That's why, once again, we are offering this session free of charge and virtually for all of you. I hope you were able to attend our first session a couple weeks ago. If not, feel free to check out our event website where you can see a recording of that session along with all of the rest that follow in this series. Now let's go ahead and take a look at our CPE requirements before we get going. In order to receive CPE, you must answer at least 3 of the 4 polling questions and be in attendance for the full 50 minutes. Those CPE certificates will be issued within 10 days. If you have not heard from anyone or received your certificate within 10 days, feel free to reach out to cbhlearning@cbh.com. A recorded version of the webinar will also be available in about a week. It'll be sent out and posted to our website and also on the event page, which I will link here shortly. If you have any questions during the webinar, type those into the Q&A box down at the bottom of your control panel. And just note, a short survey will also be posted at the conclusion of our session. We value your feedback and just hope that you take part. With that, now let's go ahead and get started. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Dixie McCurley, partner and digital advisory client account services leader with Cherry Beckert. We are thrilled to have you here today, Dixie. Please take it away.
Thank you so much, Maddie, and welcome everyone. It's my honor to be here to talk to you guys today. I lead our outsourced accounting practice, and so we help clients that want to build accounting departments, but not in-house. We help them build that in an outsourced type of way. And so every day I think about how to become a data-driven finance leader and how to help our clients do the same thing. Related to not-for-profit in our series, I'm going to talk about a few areas today. A little bit about me first is just that I serve on a number of advisory boards nationally. And why I do that is because I like to influence technology to make it better for accountants, to make it better for accounting firms as well. So we are a part and partner in a lot of different of the AICPA recommended technology programs. Additionally, related to how Fin technology works, I'm on the board with the AICPA there too. And so being an influencer in the accounting profession is, to me, one of those nerdy things that I have done my whole career. And getting our technology to work is a big part of that. I think that is a big piece, which we'll talk about over the next hour. And we'll learn about how to get the technology to work better for us. So with that, what's on our agenda today are really 3 main areas. The first one, we want to understand the value of the accounting transformation. And that's a word that I would circle or highlight in your brain. Is transformation is going to be one of the major top topics for today, and how we can do continuous improvement across our organizations. Now, I don't know if continuous improvement means what it means to you, but what it means to me is that we're never really done. It's not set it and forget it, but instead we've got to be continuously improving and plugging and playing different types of softwares. Our people will come and go, etc. And then changes on the way that we do things is a big part of that transformation. And so how to become a data-driven finance leader is really all about transformation. That's the first point for today. The second part of our agenda related to discovering the importance of connecting your financial data and non-financial data is a big deal in getting the data to be able to look at and see not only how much of something happened, but how many. And to count the non-financial data is really important too. I know all of you probably spend a lot of time analyzing your business. And usually that is that manual process where you've got to connect it all for yourself. So being a data-driven finance leader means you have that stuff at your fingertips. And that's another thing that you'll hear me say over the next hour is about that financial and non-financial data being right at your fingertips. The third major area to cover on the webinar today is to be able to realize the benefits and the significance of designing your chart of accounts for the specific reporting requirements. I'll walk you through some ideas on how to, for not-for-profits, to really maximize all of that. And then additionally, just an ask that I have of you is that I think that webinars oftentimes might be boring when you've got a speaker who doesn't answer questions and make it interactive. And so for me, it is a lot more fun to be on the webinar with all of you asking questions. And me not just talking to you about how, and what it is, but I'd love to hear your feedback, any comments that you have. So if something, is an aha, like, oh, wow, okay, tell me more about that, we'll make this much more interactive. So feel free to drop anything into the chat and the Q&A. What we'll do is Maddie will help me make sure that I'm alert to that as we go throughout the slides. So thank you all for being here today. And that's the agenda that we're going to cover. We're going to step into the first polling question. So we want to know just who we're talking to today in terms of, how many people are in your current accounting team? Is it just you? Are you by yourself? You wear many hats? Or are you in that 2 to 4 category? Do you have 5 to 10 people in your accounting department, or do you have more than 10? I know for sure that based on the size and the number of people in our clients' accounting departments, you've got to do things a little bit differently. And so having an enterprise level version versus maybe having a small business version is a big deal as well. So go ahead and drop the answer for the polling question on how many of you are currently in your accounting team. And so I'll just give you just a minute to make sure that everybody has responded. And that's also how you're going to be able to get CPE. So let's get a feel for the size of the organizations that are attending today. Okay, so it looks like the majority of the people, 40%, are in that 2 to 4 category. I can only imagine that that is probably the controller, probably an AP clerk, maybe accounts receivable, etc. So thank you all for sharing that to get an idea about the size. So let's jump into really what we're here to discuss today. Not-for-profit finance leaders must become more data-driven. And I think that it's true more than ever. Big data is all the buzz right now. And also as a finance leader, you've got to figure out how to streamline your accountant and protector processes, those two over on the right at the bottom, so that you can make time for more forward-thinking strategy. And so I want to share some statistics with you today. When I look at that leader part of the forward-thinking strategy, that's really that strategy part is oftentimes the things that we get to at the last because we're so busy. 55% of our time is usually allocated to the accountant. And to make that, get it fast and accurate, the desired time would be about 30% spent on that so that you can change that allocation. Now, in a recent poll of CFOs, 77% of those recognize the need to be able to change into a more data-driven finance leader. But 64% admit that their finance is not proactive enough. And so how are we going to be able to shift this model where that the desired time, CFOs want to spend 50% of their time being a leader, doing that forward thinking, but today's allocation is 25%. Related to, getting the clerk work off of the CFO and off of the finance leader, that's some more things that I'll talk about as we go, because usually they're lacking the time to focus on the big picture. And 34% of executives say that they make important decisions in a reactive manner instead of that they've had to put it off until the decision just can't wait any longer. And then they're trying to scramble to do it and really making a guess. And so How can we shift that into analyzing it, getting more of a strategic thinking type of thing? That's what we'll talk about in how you become more data driven. So let's talk about some of the key issues that are facing not-for-profits today. The point one here on the top key issue is that many not-for-profits are struggling to maintain the financial visibility due to a variety of factors. And some of those could be reduced government funding for you, or an increased competition for grants and donations, and also just rising costs. And so that makes it difficult to maintain the financial viability of the organization. And point two here is that meeting the evolving needs of your constituents, as the needs and expectations of the communities that you serve, not-for-profits have to be able to adapt and innovate to be able to stay relevant and also stay effective. And so that's point two, is that we've got evolving changes that happen all the time. And so that continuous improvement is definitely the technique we want to take. And then the third point here, and one of my favorite, of course, is that embracing technology. And technology can be a very powerful tool for not-for-profits to increase your impact. Many organizations struggle to adopt and implement the new technologies due to a lack of resources and expertise. But I'd like to use a mindset today of what if these issues, were of no matter. And I call it the magic wand effect. So if money and time and resources didn't matter, what are some of the first things that you would fix first? And then what would that do for your organization? So I'll ask you to just keep an open mind today about maybe if you have cost constraints or resource constraints, et cetera. Let's think about if you didn't have those constraints, or if we fix those things, then what would it look like? So the impacts of being data-driven, I just want to talk about how the function is going to improve 5 key areas. With that, I want you to think about if you had everything at your fingertips every day over a cup of coffee in the morning to be able to have better decision-making and improved efficiency so that you're not spending 4 hours creating reports. Instead, you could analyze those. And then that when you looked at and analyzed the reports, that they were much more accurate. So that increased accuracy is a really key area here as well. I can tell you that over my career, especially over the last 15 years, accuracy was one of those things that as a controller or as a CFO, when you go to review the financials and it's got errors in it, there's a lot of things that impacts. You've got to then go rework, refix the errors, et cetera. And you're spending your time, not doing the things that you need to do to analyze, because when you're there to analyze it, sometimes it can be wrong. So I've worked throughout my career to implement all the way back to the source transaction. And so we'll talk about ways over this webinar on how to increase the accuracy by relying on systems. And I think that that's going to help impact your not-for-profit as well by giving you a competitive advantage. I can tell you that I contribute to certain nonprofits that make it very easy for me to contribute to. So are you sending out automated notices and statements and announcements, et cetera? How do you pull that in? That's one thing I've been studying on how we can help our not-for-profit clients be able to have that competitive advantage where your branding is out there, you're getting your money, you're getting your donors, et cetera, and making that a seamless process. With all of that, you're going to have better risk management. And so reporting to the board, that's what a lot of our clients talk about when we get that data-driven finance function visible. That the better risk management, that we don't have any surprises, people know what's going on, visibility there, that really is a good impact of being more data driven. So in the journey to a strategic financial function, we see that moving from the left on the transactional side over to the right to the strategic side, this journey has about 3 different phases in it. The first phase on reactive is usually it's very manual, and the team is spending several hours on transactional accounting and might not be able to close the books timely. And that's what we call that financial historian that's just reporting on what happened, usually burdened with manual accounting processes, and you're backwards looking instead of being able to turn that into action. And there's really 4 steps that I talk about from data, is that if you look at data and then you look at information, that's also those reports. And then with reports, you're going to try to find insights. And how do you take action when you're in a reactive mode? It's almost impossible to do. It's one of the areas that we really help clients get into a more proactive stance. And how can you become a data-driven leader to be able to get more proactive? So if you're in this stage already, and you've probably instituted some automation, and you may have removed a lot of hours from your transactional processes. Maybe your bank recs used to take 40 hours and now they take 10 hours, et cetera. Things like that. So if you're working with a system that can provide reporting that's not quite as manual, usually we see that if you're proactive, you can turn around financials in less than 10 days. So I'm not sure if all of you are able to get your books closed on time. Maybe you do that even more rapidly than that. And so that's a good proactive stance. When we talk about the third phase of getting into the more strategic part, we want to introduce the term of predictive. And so that data-driven strategist, where you're able to predict future trends, is really powerful. So fully harnessing the power of technology and utilizing AI to automate those processes, and maybe even reduce more manual work so that you can function at a higher level in the predictive analysis part. That stuff, the predictive analysis, is in place so that you can be very precise on your forecasting, be able to make critical decisions and help the not-for-profit grow and evolve. It also takes the guesswork out of it and leads to better outcomes and also increased profitability there for the not-for-profit. So those are the 3 stages on the journey from transactional into a more strategic role. That's really the things you'll want to evaluate yourself on. So in the transformation roadmap, there's some certain things that you can do. And you may want to evaluate where you are on this transformation roadmap. So as we move out of that reactive type of way, and first step would be to make sure you implement integrated cloud-based systems. For any of you that are still using on-premise systems, I would say that that is definitely the wave of transformation, is moving into a cloud-based system. Cloud-based systems usually have open APIs that you can connect other systems to, and your financial and non-financial data can live there. Another step on the transformation roadmap would be to automate those recurring accounting tasks. And what does that look like? Well, it's that when you pay a bill, it marks the bill, it automates the bank rec, et cetera. There's a lot of ways to automate recurring accounting tasks. And then you also are going to have to look at to enhance your skill sets to be able to analyze results. I train others on how to analyze results. It's not always the same as the clerk work. And so with our digital transformation roadmap, the clerk work is actually going away. So we are trying to get to the source transaction to have that stuff recorded automatically. So think about when your customer makes the donation, it's all recorded, et cetera. How you send out invoices is all recorded. That stuff then needs to be analyzed. And so the dashboards are a big part of that. So moving from proactive into that predictive way, you want to implement the AI and predictive analytics tool that's going to show exceptions in how you manage all of that. You manage AI so that you can take over those manual processes. And I'll just share with you a little story. One of the best things that I've seen related to RPA over manual processes, or the robotics piece of that, is in filing 1099s, I was working with a firm that wrote a little script. So there's some systems out there where you can learn how to do RPA for yourself. And it picked up all the files from the W-9s, and it picked up the files for the vendors, and it automated the filing of the 1099s. And I was really blown away by that. And so I too, in being a data-driven finance leader, am learning about how we get AI to take over some of those manual processes. That's definitely the wave of the future. But you also have to enhance your skill sets to compare the data to the trends and the benchmarks. And so when you get into that, you're getting into that more predictive stance. So that's our transformation roadmap. So now we'd like to hear from you again on our second poll. So where do you currently fall on the leadership journey? You could be reactive, that you live in the past. I can tell you for sure that I lived there for a very long time. Or proactive, that you've got to hold on really the present day. If you've predicted where you're now predicting the future and the present, we'd love to hear that. And then also another option is explosive, like it's a disaster. It's so funny that for clients, occasionally with their accounting operations, they may be sometimes embarrassed of the way that the accounting functions. And that's what I want you all to realize, is that it's okay. And you can do things to help get out of that. So I talk to a lot of clients where their books are messy or it's a disaster. And we go in and help put in strategies and systems and also people on that. So it looks like the majority, 62% of you, are falling into that proactive, where you have a hold on the present. And we see a good 14% on predictive. 22% are still living in the past. And we've got 2% that explosive, and this is a disaster. So I definitely feel for you, that 2% there. Thank you all for sharing that. That's really good to know that you're all being very proactive. And I think that attending this webinar today also talks about your readiness factor. So do you have a mindset where you're open to change? And think about, do your people have the skills? So what is your largest gap in being ready for digital transformation? That's one thing I want you to think about. So if you're taking any notes on being proactive, what's the largest gap to being able to be predictive? And do you think that your team, do you think they have the capacity for the strategic thinking that you need? It's hard to do the work on the transformation while you're also doing the accounting work. So for us, we think about how could we create two different teams, because the mindset for that is a lot different. And I like to compare it to being able to get into predictive is a little bit like football. You've got the offensive coordinators, you got the defensive coordinators, but then the special teams coordinators. And that's one big area that I think you need, is special teams to be able to help do the transformation, to be able to get you into that leadership journey. All right, so related to shifting into the data-driven finance structure, I wanted to share several things about how. And so this will be the next big section for the webinar. For me, it all comes down to three areas over and over and over again. It's the people, the processes, the systems. I am sure that you all have heard that so many times before, but having the right people and the processes in place, and also systems, that's going to get your finance leaders to be able to focus their time on growing the organization and increasing visibility into real-time reporting. So when I think about people, I think about the difference of changing someone from a pilot that's flying a plane and changing them into the air traffic controllers. So I always want to talk about our controllers are a lot like air traffic controllers. So they've got to make sure everything is on time, understands how to interpret it, make sure that they're utilizing technology, making sure that the worst case scenario doesn't happen. And so when we move in to talk about our processes, I think of processes as accounts payable, accounts receivable, payroll, also the general ledger, and then management reporting is also that. And so with this, my advice for you on processes is to get to the source transaction. Oftentimes we are summarizing the source transactions and entering them with journal entries. And so for me, the processes are not journal entries. we really shouldn't have to do many journal entries once we've gotten this visibility into the real-time reporting and get to the source transaction. So renovating your processes is all about getting to the source transactions. And so the third area of systems of what to think about as we have that need for integrated systems, get them into place and make sure that we create multi-dimensional reporting and dashboards. I want you to think about your dashboards need to be including not only financial data, like is on your P&L, but also non-financial data. And think about your number of customers, your number of donors, your number of clinics, if you have clinics, et cetera. So getting these three things in balance is usually when one goes up, like let's say we're implementing new systems, not just having a P&L anymore. Usually our processes change and our people change. And so that's the big part that finance leaders need to do, or balance these three things. Sometimes certain systems and changing processes can replace people. I don't think that you should have that mindset per se. Instead, it's changing the people into more of analysis to be able to drive that strategy across the organization. So that's one of the major questions that I hear the most from clients is, if we increase our systems or have new technology, will it lower our people costs? And I think that there might be something there, but it doesn't always happen that way. Usually you turn them into a different role and more of a financial analyst instead of only a clerk. So think about it like that. And I'm just going to look and check real quick on the chat.
Yeah, hi Dixie. We did receive a couple questions from folks about CPE issues, which I think we have been able to troubleshoot throughout the chat. Some were asking about recordings and if those would be available along with the slides. We will post the recordings on the event page for everybody to see. You are receiving also some notes from folks who are just happy to hear from you and see you. So keep those positive comments coming and any questions that you guys have.
Great. Thanks so much. It looks like we have cleared the chat. Oh, Lori Tharp. Yay. So nice to see you too, Lori. Lori was one of the first bosses I ever had in my career. So what an honor to have you on today, Lori. All right. Well, we're going to jump to poll question number 3. So this one is a multiple choice, but also we want you to check all of these that apply. So where are you in your current systems? Are you using manual spreadsheets? And that really is where all of your finance leadership comes from, is Excel spreadsheets. Are you successfully already on QuickBooks and maybe QuickBooks Online, et cetera? We see that lots of clients are in the phase of outgrowing QuickBooks, so that small solution doesn't work anymore. We see other on-premise software. So if you're using something like Great Plains or Mass 500 or other ones like that, or are you in a place where you also want a cloud-based software and want to learn more about it? That's our third polling question. So I'll give you all just a minute to answer that. Okay, so we see here that there's a lot of other on-premise softwares. That's 55%. And we've got 52% coming in with manual spreadsheets. So definitely eliminating manual spreadsheets is one of the passions of my entire career. How do we do that? I also love spreadsheets. So spreadsheets definitely have their place. And then it looks like a lot of people are successfully on QuickBooks at 17%. And 33% of you are wanting a cloud-based software. Well, that's all really good news. I'm happy to see that. The move to the cloud has been coming for many years, and it was not that apparent that as many people wanted to do it as it is today. So I think the COVID and the pandemic really shook it up, that going into the office was no longer an option, and the move to the cloud is definitely real and one of those things that we see happening. So let's talk about implementing the right tools. There's going to be 3 technology capabilities for your tech stack, and you want to make sure that it's included for you to become that data-driven finance leader. The ability to automate the financial operations is a huge benefit, and also to have multi-dimensional analysis of key results. That's going to be the key for your reporting and compliance, and you want your data to sync with other systems in real time, and that's the benefit of those cloud-based systems, is that they're usually the easiest to sync. And so my advice to you when you're looking at the right tools is to draw a picture of what you want it to look like. And so I think you should start with the end in mind. If you had a view, if you had a dashboard, if you had a chart, if you had a graph, what would it look like that every single morning over a cup of coffee that you would look out and see what's going on in the organization and where you could drill into it? That's a big part of this, is drawing a picture. Oftentimes clients start with, oh, we're just going to start with the chart of accounts and we're going to redo that into a new system, but it actually doesn't give you what you need if you don't know how to draw the picture of what you're looking for. And we see some stumbles on that with implementing the right tools. So think about the end in mind. What are you trying to get in terms of your key results? And then you back into the how to do that. Related to automating financial operations, the big thing here is that we want to cut out manual processes. And this is where I talk about that your people are not necessarily going to go away, but we're going to repurpose the time to focus on the analysis and all the stuff that they want to do. So moving into that 50% strategy type of role for a finance leader of interpretation and decision-making. There's lots of organizations that are looking for CFOs for not only the strategic leadership, but also 78% of CFOs have noticed that their influence is expanding beyond just accounting and finance. And when we also think about not-for-profit CFOs were surveyed, 87% feel pressure to collaborate on cross-functional initiatives. And so thinking about the program, the administration, those fundraising expenses, not just calculating and recording that stuff, but let's have that automated so that you can get into the cross-functional initiatives of being able to take action on that. And so that's that move, as I mentioned before, from data to getting the data in there, to creating reports, to getting into insight, and then being able to take action. So looking at your customer profile, that most of you may have a CRM where you're looking at the customer profile or your donor profiles. We're going to reduce having to record things twice and manually track all of that stuff. So getting into an automated financial operations is the point of cutting out those manual processes and cutting out Excel. Now, in terms of your chart of accounts, your chart of accounts is no longer only about the accounts. It's the visibility and the impact of all of the data. And one of the things that I've learned in my career is how to leverage the dimensions to be able to slice and dice your data for maximum visibility and impact. And this is where I see the connection comes from the accounting and the finance function. So with systems today, especially some online systems, you can rename and you can fill out, by specific version where your who is not a customer, but you change it to be a donor. You can change the dimensions name. So you can easily rename those to meet your needs. And so if you needed to change the where to be the country that it happened in, and also the what, so if you have a program or a fund or a grant type, etc., you get into the line item transactions. And so now this is the source transaction. So when we have the source transaction, first of all, if it's automated or coded to the right place, so the transaction value of 1.5 million is coded to the donor or the grantor, is coded to the country, is coded to the grant for immunizations, and it's coded to the type, and it's a bill back type. So when you get the source transaction coded to all this, this is how your information really comes alive. So that is going to go into a dashboard that is very structured. And this is your start with the picture or start with the end in mind. So with multidimensional analysis of key results, when you leverage those, as an example, I know many of you might have to be getting close to the screen right now, but what I want to point out is just the flexibility of this. And so with flexibility, you can see on the right side, the statement of activities is without donor restrictions. And then you can see it with donor restrictions, and then you can see the total. A lot of people only just see the total, and then you've got to break that out manually. But there we see that grant revenue with donor restrictions is 125,000. It's clear, it's obvious, it's visible, and then you can slice and dice it. So in terms of synchronizing data, you want to do it with your other sources as well. So it's not just the financial numbers, but it's also operational measures. And in addition, connecting that to your CRM, human capital management is so important right now. And labor is oftentimes the majority. Salaries are the majority of the spend on that. And so what does your turnover look like? What does your head count look like compared to what you're spending? What would happen if you eliminated positions? And think about that online activity that you've got from your websites, et cetera. If you have a billing system where you're already sending out things, it's not only about the GAAP statistical data, but it's also, non-GAAP statistical data that's really important. And that is going to be the importance here of connecting all of your systems. Now, I wanted to also share with you today, a big part is not only your general ledger system. I think being a data-driven finance leader is all about also the reconciliations process that can happen in a month-end close software. So let's say that you had a goal to close the books faster and you wanted to buy a month-end close software package. Usually your general ledger codes connect into that. So your manual Excel sheets where you're typing in from your system, typing in the balance, you don't have to do that anymore. Those account balances and those accounts, they come over as you tag them for that. And then in the monthly close software, you can automate your journal entries and your adjustments, any payroll or accrual entries, and then it goes back into the general ledger. That data synchronization there allows you to close the books faster and more accurately. It rolls forward all of your schedules, et cetera. And that's going to unite your disparate teams and processes and data into a much more collaborative platform. So that's just another example of using other systems and other data sources and dashboards to watch. As an example here, we see that we've got a cash balance down in the bottom, the little donut picture of 2.4 billion. And of that, you can see the amount that's reconciled and the amount that's unreconciled. So managing that back office software and your month-end close software to see that you haven't even prepared any of your account reconciliations yet, that certification process that tracks it as you go, that's that non-statistical information that we want to see across the organization. So in terms of substantiating accounts with a month-end close software, I'm going to start there in the middle, the automated reconciliation template. It comes pre-populated after you get imported automatically your general ledger balance, your bank balance, your subledger balances. And then also you're going to look at and see if it meets the certification criteria for populated policies and procedures. If it's certified, on average, 43 to 85% has auto certification. Imagine if all of your reconciliations were automated where the system certified them for you, where you're not having to go in and prepare all of that. And so as you keep moving forward and add reconciling items, you can attach comments and documents, get to a complete closed checklist and certify. That's what that picture was on the last slide. That easy reconciliation process is going to reduce your turnover of your accounting team. People want to do better work. People want to analyze it. They don't want to have to be doing all these things manually. And that's going to allow you to make better accounting decisions when you have a reduced error, reduced rework, and having the system be auto certified. Now, another big area, and I'm sure all of you, especially all you proactive ones who self-identified as proactive, the bank rec process also of the matching to the bank file. If you're not doing this today, you really should look at, should you be able to get all of your reconciling differences preset, only handling the unmatched items. So that automated matching engine with flexible matching rules to get just to the unmatched items, that's where you're going to be able to get that 50% strategy and take it down less than 20% on your clerk work, I like to call it. But getting that monthly reconciliation and bank template in there, your comments in completed, that's going to go faster. It's a much more proactive approach. And so if you're not doing a month-end close software and you need one, I would say that, this is a big area of savings and accuracy and compliance as well. So I'll also share with you another example of a dashboard where you're going to be able to quickly see those results. So as we bring in source transactions from other sources, like the number of patients served, this is a sample clinic metric, the outcomes, and non-GAAP statistical data is here, like the number of office visits. We can see that it's up 8,100 this year versus the prior year. That our number of clinicians is up 14 this year versus the prior year, and that our revenue per clinician is $23,000 per clinician. And think about if that was revenue per donor or your average donor revenue there. You can look at and aggregate different things like your revenue and your expenditures. If there's a surplus, if there's a loss, that's over on the right bottom side. So think about by clinic. Now, the thing that I love the most are these filters here. So when you get into that more of a dashboard view, you can look at across your funds. So if you wanted to narrow it just for one fund versus the others, or just one project or one grant, or one department versus another, you could easily do that right there at your fingertips. And that's having the information all coded, all connected at your fingertip is really that big utilization of the dashboards. You can see it here on that revenue per clinician is that outcome metric that we want to see for this clinic.
And Dixie, before we jump into the case studies, we did have a couple questions come in from the audience. One question is, what advice do you have for teams interested in becoming more automated and analytical, but we're struggling to find the time to implement these tools while putting out all the different fires and handling daily tasks?
Sure. One piece of advice I'll give you is I love Simon Sinek. He wrote the book called Start with Why. And he has a little video on YouTube that talks about disruption and talks about digital transformation and disruption. And so with that part, you'll want to just start small. And my advice is wipe your calendar clean one afternoon and just sit and think about it. Start with the magic wand. If you could have anything, what would it look like? And then prioritize it. So it can take a couple of months, et cetera. If any of you, we can do a 30-minute session, an introductory session, if you'd like. I'm happy to give you all any of the tiny little advice that you need. And, the first thing is just to start. So I would say make the time to strategize. And read and look at Start with Why. And that's the first part of the strategy piece of that. So you must make time for strategy. I can tell you that my day usually gets blown up as well. So I do understand that. But the more time I focus on the strategy and making it happen, I'll just share with you that we were able to reduce one of our processes that we do for several different clients. We were able to reduce it to a third by adding a new software product for us. And so that type of time savings is going to take a special teams to implement, but you will get the time savings. I think cloud-based software, moving from on-prem to cloud-based and having a connected system like this is going to free you up 50 to 75% of your time to be able to do the analysis. Now, I'm not saying it's not a special project. I'm not saying it's not going to take a big lift, but that's where you've got to let the fires happen occasionally and know that that's okay, but prioritize putting these things in place.
Okay, so try to make the time to then save yourself time later on.
Yeah,
sure. And we did have one more question. I think this stemmed back to when you were talking about substantiating accounts, perhaps. It's a question, how do you automate the restriction piece?
Yeah, so the key here is to code it to restricted or non-restricted in a different dimension, and then it tracks all the way through. That would be a different dimension to know which funds are restricted, et cetera, how much you've used for that. It's sort of like tracking a project, how much is retained, et cetera. So dimensionalizing the data is my answer for that one. All right, so I wanted to share a couple of case studies with you in terms of, we had a Texas not-for-profit client, and they were in the situation where we identified that they had no real-time reporting. They had an extended wait period to get month-end numbers. It was way more than their board wanted. And they had other staff getting pulled into the accounting function. And so with that, they were not able to perform the daily functions of their family programming. So their not-for-profit was definitely suffering. And so they had plans to put in a for-profit arm, but they had to put them on hold. And they had been on hold for months when we finally helped them implement some solutions. And so we turned them onto a cloud-based accounting system where the whole team could collaborate with experts. And we input automation for operational processes like accounts payable. Another big thing that we did was redesign their chart of accounts to be able to give them the reports that they need. And we also shortened the month-end close process. And they've been able now to provide weekly updates to management. And so they have been able to open their for-profit consulting arm in January of this year after being with us for just a few months. And so we helped them outsource some of their accounting in this instance, but they could have hired a team internally to do it as well, but now they just don't feel like they have to. So this is one good example from a Texas not-for-profit that we have of what the solutions can do when you get into that world. It might allow you to go into, a new area for your not-for-profit and work on that strategy there. Additionally, we've worked with a newly formed foundation, and they didn't have an accounting team. They had some partners in the foundation to lead it, but not do the accounting. And they had a manual accounting system that was on paper. So they were going to send out Word documents or PDFs to everybody to collect the money for the foundation. And they were sending manual invoices to over 100 donors. And they didn't know how they were going to receive payments other than manually by check, or they were thinking, how do we get the bank account information for that? And so when we implemented a cloud-based solution and we provided the outsourced accounting function to them, they were then able to see and automate all of the pledge receivables. So they had a spreadsheet, we imported it into the system, and all of a sudden we immediately sent out all the invoices for them to collect it. So you can imagine that they had no clue how they were going to get the money in time. And we utilized an online tool also for dashboards. And so we set it up where they could see how much had been collected by when, and now we've got one. So they were able to receive 98% of all the payments electronically, and they collected 20% of the pledges within 1 week. And so the board had daily updates throughout with a dashboard to see who had made their pledges and who had not. And so that was a big success of a case study for a foundation that turned on and needed to get pledges really quickly. So a lot of things to think about there of how you collect money from your donors and initiating a process to get that into a repetitive type mode. All right, so time for our last polling question, number 4. Would you like to further connect with Cherry Beckert? Yes, no, maybe in the future. You can let us know if you have accounting needs, etc. If you need advice on software and technologies, we're that partner that can answer those types of questions for you or help you get there. You can either do it yourself or you can have a partner to participate in that. So I'll give you all just a couple of seconds there to answer that one. And in case any of you don't know, Cherry Beckert, we are one of the top 20 accounting firms, but we have lots of different areas. And so we do digital transformation for clients. We help with a lot of different types of softwares. We can help with the strategy part of it as well too. So we're more than just an accounting firm and more than just a CPA firm. I like to say that we're the firm of the future. And we're helping clients digitally transform to become that data-driven finance leader. So did we get the results on that, Maddie?
Yes, we did. Yeah, thank you all for
Great.
giving us your responses. So we are good to go.
Okay, great. Well, just pulling it all together on what is needed to be a data-driven finance leader. I hope today that you have learned about moving from data to information is usually where we see most clients sit, but to be able to get into that position of insights and action, to be able to take action on the numbers in real time really is the goal of how to become a data-driven finance leader. And so with that, I'll just want to wrap up on some of the things that we've covered today. So being able to look at it from a perspective of the people, the processes, and the systems, that's going to empower you to transition into that data-driven finance leader. Getting out of their transactional clerk work, I like to say, and moving from a reactive type of stance, getting much more proactive, and then also getting it all set up to be strategic and also predictive, predict what's happening in the future. That's what we're talking about. Being a data-driven finance leader is all about. That's going to help you if you create that environment, have that automated financial operations so you can analyze the numbers over a cup of coffee in the morning. Look at multidimensional analysis of your key results. So do we have the right number of donors? Do we have the right number of spend on our funds? And synchronize that data into all of those other systems. That's really what you've learned today on this webinar. What we wanted to share with you is how to become a data-driven finance leader. And so we thank you all so much for your time today. With that, we'll open it up and save some time for any questions that any of you may have.
Yes, thank you so much, Dixie. Wonderful presentation. You had a lot of information. And of course, like you said, Cherry Bekaert has a lot to offer for any folks who do want to connect with us later. Thanks for the hand claps. Yes, feel free to react and give Dixie your best there. This was our second session of the series, so thank you again for joining us. There is a link in the chat if you'd like to register for the upcoming sessions as well, or click on some of the recordings from previous sessions. Those are all available. We value your feedback. You'll be asked to take a short survey as soon as the session ends. And just a reminder, the next one is coming up on May 2nd. It's at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and the topic is cryptocurrency and how it relates to the not-for-profit organizations.